The house in Illinois was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes in the mid-afternoon when the world outside seems to hold its breath. Sunlight fell in warm rectangles across the living room floor, catching dust motes dancing in the air. In the corner of the room, standing like a patient, dark-wooded guardian, was the piano. It was an old family thing, sturdy and reliable. And there, with her small socked feet dangling a good foot from the floor, sat a little girl. Her name was Emily. She was 6 years old. To anyone peeking through the window, she looked like any other child, maybe a bit small for her age, with hair that was always just escaping from whatever clip her mother had tried that morning. But her focus was absolute. The world of a 6-year-old is usually a whirl of questions and motion. But here, at the piano, Emily was still. Her small hands, which moments before had been sticky from a piece of fruit, rested lightly on the keys. She wasn't reading music. There was no sheet on the stand in front of her. Instead, she tilted her head, listening to a song only she could hear inside her mind. Then, she began to play. It wasn't chopsticks. It wasn't a clumsy scale. The melody that floated out was complex, a waterfall of notes that tumbled over each other in happy, rhythmic patterns. It sounded like sunshine sounds if sunshine could make noise. Her left hand found a bass line, simple but solid, giving the right hand's dancing melody a place to call home. She was making it up, on the spot, as easily as another child might tell a story about a magical dragon. This was not a new scene for the Bear family. Her mother, sitting on the sofa with a mug of tea that had long gone cold, watched with a familiar mix of wonder and worry. She remembered the first time. Emily was just 2, barely walking steadily. That same piano had been there, and Emily had toddled over, drawn to it like a moth to a lamp. She'd reached up, her tiny fingers pressing a single key. Asterisk clang, asterisk, she'd giggled. Then another. Soon, she wasn't just banging. She was matching the notes her grandmother would play during her lessons. She'd hear a tune on the television or the radio, and an hour later, its echo would be coming from the living room, not perfect, but unmistakable. By 4, she was picking out full songs. By 5, she was bored with just playing other people's music. She started creating her own. Her parents, good people who worked regular jobs and wanted a regular, happy life for their daughter, were baffled. This wasn't in any parenting book. How do you parent a melody? How do you discipline a chord progression? They weren't musicians themselves. Her mother loved to listen to the radio in the car. Her father had a few old CDs he'd play on weekends. They could tell what they were hearing from their daughter was different. It was a language she spoke fluently, one they could only listen to from the outside. They decided early on that their job wasn't to be managers, but guardians. Guardians of her gift, yes, but more importantly, guardians of her childhood. The piano was never a punishment or a rigid practice schedule. It was a friend, a toy, a voice. Emily would play for an hour, then run outside to chase fireflies. She'd compose a little piece about rain, then demand to make cookies, her small hands now covered in flour instead of piano dust. They kept her life balanced, or tried to. The gift was a part of her, but not her entire world. Her world was also made of storybooks and swing sets, and the family dog, a shaggy mutt who would often lie under the piano bench as she played, his tail thumping time on the floor. The real guide was her grandmother, a patient woman with kind eyes and a lifelong love of music. She was the one who gave the gift a little shape. She didn't push. She would sit beside Emily and show her how chords lived together, how a story could be told in a minor key. She called it playing games with the notes. Emily adored her. Their lessons were less like school and more like a shared secret. Her grandmother was the first to say out loud, her voice soft with certainty, "This isn't just a good ear. This is something very special. She doesn't just hear music. She thinks in it." One afternoon, a family friend was visiting. He was a man who worked in the music industry, not a big-shot producer, but someone who knew talent when he heard it. He was in the kitchen, talking with Emily's father about baseball, when the sound started flowing in from the living room. He stopped mid-sentence, his head cocked. "Is that the radio?" he asked. Emily's father smiled a small, proud smile. "No, that's just Emily." The friend got up and walked to the doorway. He watched the small girl, completely lost in her own world, her hands creating a piece that was joyful, intricate, and startlingly mature. He listened for a full 5 minutes, not saying a word. When the music finally tapered off into a soft, finished chord, he let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. He found Emily's parents later, his face serious. "You know that what's happening in your living room isn't normal, right?" he said. "This isn't just a cute kid who plays well. This is a real prodigy. The world should hear this." The word hung in the air. Asterisk prodigy, asterisk. It felt like a heavy, complicated word. It sounded like pressure and spotlights, and things they had consciously tried to keep away from their little girl. The world. What did the world want with their 6-year-old? "She's happy here," her mother said, a protective edge in her voice. "I know she is," the friend replied gently. "And you've done an amazing job. But a light this bright isn't meant to be hidden under a basket. It could bring joy to so many people. It could show people that magic is real." The conversation started that night and continued for weeks. It was a quiet tug-of-war in their hearts. The fear was real. They knew nothing of show business, of media, of the potential pitfalls. They pictured harsh lights, demanding strangers, and their little girl's joyful playing turning into a chore. They pictured her losing the very spark that made the music so beautiful. But another part of them wondered if their friend was right. Was keeping this all to themselves a kind of hiding? Emily loved to play for people. When family came over, she'd perform her latest composition, beaming at their applause. She didn't get nervous. She got excited. She loved to share the stories her music told. Finally, they decided on a kind of test. A single, safe step. The friend knew someone who could get a tape to the right people. They would send a simple, homemade video. Just Emily, at her piano, playing one of her original songs. No pressure, no promises. They would let the universe decide. If nothing happened, that was fine. It was a sign to continue on their quiet path. If something did happen, well, they'd cross that bridge carefully. One Saturday morning, they cleared the toys from around the piano. Her father set up a camcorder on a tripod. "Okay, Em," her mother said, smoothing down her hair. "Just play like you always do. Play Northern Lights." It was Emily's newest piece. One she said was about the colorful dancing skies from a picture in her book. Emily nodded, not seeming to care about the camera's red recording light. She scooted onto the bench, took a deep breath as she'd seen real pianists do on TV, and let her hands fall. And just like that, the magic filled the room again. The camera captured it all. The focused little face, the flying hands, the astonishingly beautiful music coming from such a small person. They mailed the tape off on Monday, and then they tried to forget about it. Life went back to normal preschool, playdates, piano games. The big, wide world felt far away again, which was just how they liked it. Until the phone rang 2 weeks later. It was a Los Angeles area code. The voice on the other end was cheerful, professional, and utterly clear. "Hi, is this the Bear family? This is Asterisk, the Ellen DeGeneres show Asterisk. We saw your tape. We love Emily. We'd like to have her on the show." The phone call ended, but the silence it left in the Illinois kitchen was loud. Emily's mother stood with the cordless phone still in her hand, staring at the countertop as if it might offer an explanation. Her father, who had been unloading groceries, held a can of soup, frozen in place. "Well," he asked finally, the word cutting through the quiet that was. "Ellen the show," her mother said, her voice a mix of disbelief and a sudden, sharp anxiety. "They want her. They want her to come to California and play on television." For a moment, they just looked at each other. This was the something they had half hoped for and half feared. It wasn't a maybe anymore. It was a plane ticket, a date on a calendar, a real, concrete thing. The videotape had been a message in a bottle, tossed into a vast ocean. They never truly expected it to reach the shore. Now, a giant, sparkling ship was waiting for them, and they had to decide whether to board. The next few days were a quiet whirlwind. They talked in low voices after Emily was in bed, the glow of the table lamp making a small pool of light between them. The worries tumbled out. Was this too much, too soon? Would she be scared under those huge lights, in front of a studio audience and millions of people at home? What if people were mean? What if this changed her, turned her joy into a job? They were her protectors, and this felt like leading their lamb into a very bright, very noisy meadow. But then they'd watch her. The next afternoon, Emily was at the piano, not practicing, but exploring asterisk. She was trying to make a sound like the family dog's tail thumping on the floor, a low, rhythmic thump 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 in the bass, and then a high, laughing melody over the top for his happy panting. She giggled to herself, completely delighted by her own musical idea. She had no fear of the piano. It was her playground. Would a bigger playground frighten her? The turning point came from an unlikely source, Emily herself. They decided to broach the subject gently. Over her favorite dinner of macaroni and cheese, sweetie, her mother began, choosing her words as carefully as placing stepping stones across a stream. You know the video we made? The people who have that fun TV show, with the dancing and the nice lady who gives people presents. They saw it. They thought your music was so happy that they'd like you to come play it on their show. Emily stopped, a noodle dangling from her fork. Her eyes, wide and blue, went from her mother to her father. On TV, like a cartoon? Sort of, her father said with a soft laugh. But real. You'd sit at a big piano, and a nice lady named Ellen would talk to you, and a whole big room full of people would listen to you play. They braced for hesitation, for questions about monsters or loud noises. Instead, Emily's face lit up with pure, uncomplicated excitement. Can I play my song about the colors in the sky? She asked immediately. That was it. No what-ifs, no I'm scared. Her mind didn't jump to the crowd or the cameras. It jumped to the music. Which song would she share? In her 6-year-old mind, this wasn't a performance. It was a sharing session, just on a much bigger scale. Seeing that clarity helped her parents find their own. Their job wasn't to say no out of fear. Their job was to say yes, and then build a bridge strong enough for her to cross safely. They would go, but on their terms. They would be a wall between her and any chaos. They would make it an adventure, not an audition. The mission control phase began. The living room, usually a landscape of toys and picture books, took on a new purpose. It became their headquarters. Her grandmother came over often, not to drill Emily, but to play musical games with her. They talked about the piano on the show being different, how the keys might feel the same but sound a little louder. It's like talking in your regular voice, and then talking in a big, echo-y cave. Her grandmother said, the cave is fun, but it's still your voice. Her mother took on the role of logistics commander. There were plane tickets to book, a hotel to find near the studio, questions about what time they needed to arrive. She packed a special bag for Emily with not just her pretty dress for the show, but her most loved, worn-out stuffed rabbit, her favorite pajamas, and a stack of storybooks. The familiar comforts were just as important as the sheet music. Her father became the guardian of normalcy. While the trip preparations swirled, he made sure there were still afternoons at the park. He'd lift her onto his shoulders for a walk, pointing out squirrels and interesting clouds, never mentioning Hollywood. He was quietly making sure the ground beneath her feet, no matter how high she might fly, remained solid and familiar. Emily, for her part, was intrigued but not obsessed. She'd practice her piece, Northern Lights, maybe once or twice a day, but then she'd run off to build a fort with cushions or help her mother stir cookie dough. The trip was an exciting blob on her horizon, but it didn't color every moment. She was more concerned with the immediate mystery of where the dog had hidden his favorite chew toy. A week before they were to leave, a package arrived from the show. It was addressed to Emily. Inside was a small, soft gift, a cozy blanket with the show's logo on it and a friendly, handwritten note welcoming her. It was a small gesture, but to her parents, it felt huge. It felt kind. It eased a knot of tension they hadn't fully admitted was there. This wasn't a factory. They seemed to understand they were inviting a little girl. The night before the flight, the usual bedtime routine felt more significant. After her bath and story, Emily's mother sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her fine hair. Are you feeling excited for our airplane adventure tomorrow? She asked. Emily nodded, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Will the piano on TV be shiny? Probably very shiny. Her mother smiled. Good. I'll play my best song for the shiny piano. And with that, she rolled over, her eyelids already drooping. The monumental nature of it all was lost on her. She was going to see a big plane, stay in a hotel, and play a song on a shiny piano for a nice lady. That was the sum total of it. Downstairs, her parents had one last quiet talk. The suitcase was by the door. The documents were in a folder. The journey was upon them. We can still turn back, her father said, not really meaning it, but needing to say it out loud. Her mother looked toward the stairs, toward the room where their daughter slept peacefully. No, she said, her voice firm with a newfound resolve. This is her music. We're just the ones holding the door open for her. She's not walking into a trial. She's walking in to share a gift. How can we say no to that? She took his hand. The fear was still there, a cold little stone in each of their stomachs, but it was now outweighed by something else, a thrilling, nervous pride, and a deep trust in the joyful little heart of the girl upstairs. They were not pushing a prodigy onto a stage. They were accompanying their daughter, Emily, on a grand adventure. And tomorrow, the adventure would begin with an early morning drive to the airport under the wide, waiting sky. The world of the television studio was nothing like the quiet living room back home. It was a universe of noise and movement, a giant machine humming with a purpose they couldn't yet see. From the moment the heavy soundproof door swung shut behind them, Emily's small hand tightened in her mother's. It wasn't scary, exactly. It was overwhelming. The ceiling was a jungle of black metal grids, holding up thousands of lights, each one cold and unblinking. Thick, snaking cables, like sleeping boa constrictors, ran across the floor, taped down with thick black gaffer tape. People moved everywhere, not walking, but surging. They carried clipboards, cameras on their shoulders, cups of coffee. Their voices were a low, serious murmur of numbers and technical words. Check the levels. Move boom 2. We need her in hair and makeup in 10. Emily's father put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Feeling the slight tension there, he leaned down. It's just a big, busy workshop, he whispered. They're all getting the toys ready for the show. She looked up at him, then back at the controlled chaos, and gave a small, thoughtful nod. They were ushered into a small, brightly lit room labeled green room. It wasn't green. It was beige, with a sofa, a table of fruit and pastries, and a television screen showing the empty stage. It felt like a waiting room at the fanciest doctor's office in the world. A friendly woman with a headset brought Emily a juice box and smiled. You're going to do great, sweetie. Ellen is so excited to meet you. Emily took the juice box politely, but didn't drink it. She was absorbing everything, her eyes wide. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her feet in their shiny new shoes not touching the floor, her stuffed rabbit tucked firmly under her arm. The familiar softness of its ears was a tiny anchor in this strange sea backstage. The energy was shifting. The audience was being let into the studio now. The low murmur of the crew was replaced by the growing, lively buzz of hundreds of people chatting and laughing, finding their seats. The sound filtered through the walls, a distant ocean of excitement. A man in a black shirt with a walkie-talkie popped his head in. 5 minutes to places, folks. We'll come get the little one for a quick sound check on the piano. This was it. The moment that had been a far-off idea 4 weeks was now measured in minutes. Emily's mother knelt in front of her, adjusting the collar of her colorful dress. Okay, my love. They're just going to have you play a few notes on the big piano out there, to make sure it sounds nice. It's just like our piano at home, only bigger. You don't have to play your song yet. Just a little hello to the keys. Emily looked at her, perfectly calm. Is it shiny? I bet it's the shiniest piano you've ever seen, her mother said, her own heart thumping so hard she was sure Emily could hear it. They were led out of the green room and into the wings of the stage itself. Here, it was darker, crowded with more equipment and shadowy figures. And there, under a single work light, was the grand piano. It was a beautiful, deep ebony, polished to a mirror finish. It looked like a sleeping giant. The stage manager, a gentle-voiced woman, guided Emily forward. Go ahead, honey. Just play a little something so we can hear you. Emily walked toward the piano, her small figure dwarfed by its immense curved side. She reached out one finger and tapped a single, high key. Ping. The note was clear and bright, ringing out into the vast, dark studio. A small smile touched her lips. She climbed onto the plush bench, which had been specially bolstered with cushions so she could reach. She placed her rabbit carefully beside her. Then, almost without thinking, her hands drifted into a few bars of a happy, rippling scale. A musical giggle. The sound was perfect, beautiful. Thank you, Emily, the stage manager said. You can come back now. As Emily hopped down and retrieved her rabbit, a new kind of quiet fell over the backstage area. The audience was seated. The crew had taken their positions. There was a tense, electric feeling in the air, the calm before a storm of applause. Emily's parents were brought to a spot in the wings where they could see the stage, but not be seen. They stood together, holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. Then, the music started, the show's famous, upbeat theme song. The audience roared. The lights on stage exploded into a brilliant, warm blaze. And Ellen DeGeneres walked out, smiling her easy smile, waving to the crowd. The monologue began. Jokes, laughter, the rhythmic back and forth of a talk show host in her element. It all felt like a separate world, a fast-moving river they were supposed to jump into. Emily watched from the side, peeking around a heavy black curtain. She wasn't looking at Ellen, she was looking at the piano, sitting there under the hot lights, waiting. Finally, After what felt like both an eternity and a single blink, they heard Ellen's voice through the speakers above them. "Now, we have a very special little girl joining us today. She is 6 years old, and she composes and plays the most incredible music I have ever heard. Please welcome Emily Bear." The audience applauded, a warm, welcoming sound. The stage manager gave Emily a tiny nudge. "Go on, honey. Just walk to the piano." And she did. She walked out, all by herself, into that blinding pool of light. The applause swelled at the sight of her, this tiny person in a bright dress, clutching a well-loved stuffed rabbit. She didn't wave. She didn't seem to see the hundreds of faces in the dark beyond the lights. Her eyes were fixed on the piano. She walked right up to it, gave the shiny surface an appreciative little pat with her free hand, and then climbed up onto the bench, ranging her rabbit beside her just as she had before. Ellen, smiling warmly, came and sat on a stool next to the piano. The audience grew quiet, leaning forward. This was the moment everyone wondered about. Would she freeze? Would she cry for her mom? Ellen spoke softly, her voice kind. "Hi, Emily." Emily looked at her, blinked in the light, and said a clear, quiet, "Hi. I heard you write your own music. Is that true?" Emily nodded. "Yes. What are you going to play for us today?" "My song called Northern Lights," Emily said, her voice gaining a little strength. "It's about the colors that dance in the sky." "Oh, I love that," Ellen said, her face full of genuine delight. "Are you ready?" Emily nodded again. She took a deep breath, just like she did at home. She positioned her small hands over the gleaming black and white keys. For a second, she was completely still. In the wings, her mother stopped breathing. Her father's hand was a vice on her shoulder. Then, Emily Bear began to play. The first notes were not timid. They did not tiptoe out. They arrived, clear and confident. A sparkling little cascade of sound that fell into the silent studio, like drops of water in a quiet cave. Her right hand danced in the upper register, playing a melody that was immediately catchy, something that felt both playful and deeply thoughtful. It was the musical equivalent of a sunbeam, bright, warm, and impossible to ignore. For the first few seconds, the audience reaction was a collective holding of breath. They saw a child. They expected, at best, a competent performance of a simple piece. But this was not that. This was a full, complete, complex musical thought. You could see the confusion ripple through them, a physical adjustment as they leaned forward in their seats, their polite smiles softening into looks of pure, unguarded surprise. Then, Emily's left hand joined in. It didn't just play a few supporting notes. It laid down a rich, walking bass line that gave the dancing melody a foundation, a sense of journey. The two hands worked together not as a child's awkward imitation, but as a seamless unit. The rhythm had a natural, swinging pulse to it. The piece began to build, little themes repeating and evolving, moving from a sense of wonder into a section of joyful, skipping energy. Ellen DeGeneres, sitting just a few feet away on her stool, was the first public barometer of what was happening. Her initial expression of warm encouragement shifted, second by second. Her eyebrows raised. Her smile didn't fade, but it changed from a host's smile to a smile of genuine, stunned discovery. She looked from Emily's fiercely focused face to her flying hands, then out to the audience as if to say, "Asterisk, do you hear this? Are you hearing what I'm hearing?" Asterisk. Her hand came up and covered her mouth, her eyes wide above it, back in the wings. Emily's parents were a statue of tension and emotion. Her mother had both hands pressed over her heart, as if trying to keep it from leaping out of her chest. The sound, their daughter's sound, the one that filled their living room every day, was now soaring through this cavernous space, amplified and perfect. But it wasn't just the sound, it was the sight of her. She was not looking at the keys. Her gaze was fixed on a point somewhere above the piano, her head swaying slightly with the rhythm she was creating. She was gone. She was in the world of the song, chasing those northern lights across the sky of her imagination. The bright TV lights, the crowd, Ellen, none of it existed. There was only the story in the music. The piece swelled. Emily used the entire piano, her small body leaning into the powerful lower chords, then scampering back up to the delicate high notes. She wasn't just playing notes. She was painting with them. You could almost see the shimmering greens and purples, the swirling dance of the aurora. There was a middle section that grew quiet and mysterious, a musical question, before bursting back into the exuberant main theme with even more energy than before. The audience was utterly captive. You could see people shaking their heads slowly in disbelief. Some had tears welling in their eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer, unexpected beauty of it, the collision of such youthful innocence with such profound artistic expression. It defied logic. A 6-year-old body was a vessel for music that seemed to hold the wisdom of someone who had lived much longer. The contrast was what stole the breath away. Ellen slowly removed her hand from her mouth, her expression now one of deep, profound respect. She watched Emily with the awe of someone witnessing a natural wonder, a shooting star, a rainbow arcing perfectly over a mountain. This was no longer just a cute segment. It was a moment of real magic unfolding live on her stage. Emily approached the finale. The music became grander, more dramatic, a series of ascending chords that built anticipation like a storyteller raising their voice. And then, with a final, brilliant, cascading run down the keyboard, she landed on one solid, perfect chord. It rang out, rich and full, and then she lifted her hands, letting the last vibration hang in the warm air. The silence that followed was absolute for one heartbeat, two. Then, it broke. The eruption was not just applause. It was a visceral, emotional release. The entire audience shot to their feet as one creature. The sound was a wall of pure, thunderous joy and astonishment. It wasn't polite clapping. It was cheering, whistling, shouts of bravo. People were beaming, wiping their eyes, turning to each other with expressions that said, "Did that really just happen?" Ellen was on her feet too, applauding fiercely. She walked over to the piano as the ovation continued to roll over them. Emily, seeming to return to her body from a faraway place, blinked in the light. A shy, slightly dazed smile touched her lips as she became aware of the roaring sound she had created. She looked at Ellen approaching, then quickly scooped up her stuffed rabbit, holding it close. Ellen knelt down right there on the stage, bringing herself to Emily's eye level. The camera closed in on them. Ellen's face was earnest, her voice thick with emotion as she spoke into her microphone, barely audible over the continuing applause. "That was the most extraordinary thing I have ever heard." She looked right into Emily's eyes. "You are extraordinary. Do you know that?" Emily, unsure of how to handle such a direct, powerful compliment, just gave a little shrug and hugged her rabbit tighter. But her smile grew. The audience, finally beginning to settle back into their seats, was now a sea of rapt attention. This was the interview part, but now no one saw just a cute kid. They saw a musical force of nature who happened to be small enough to need a booster cushion. "You make all of that up in your head?" Ellen asked, her tone still one of wonder. Emily nodded. Sometimes I think of stories, and then I play them. And you're 6. Another nod. Ellen sat back on her heels, laughing in amazement. She asked about the piano at home, about how long she'd been playing. Every simple, soft-spoken answer from Emily made the accomplishment seem more incredible. The normalcy of her, the love for her rabbit, the simple way she described her process contrasted so sharply with the genius they had just witnessed that it multiplied the effect. She wasn't a robot. She wasn't a trained puppet. She was a little girl with an unbelievable gift. Then Ellen asked the question everyone was thinking. "Can you do it again? Right now, just make something up." A murmur of excitement went through the crowd. Emily didn't hesitate. She nodded, set her rabbit down, and turned back to the piano. She thought for just a second, her small fingers hovering. Then she launched into a completely new, impromptu piece. It was different, faster, more rhythmic, like a playful chase scene. It was proof. The first song wasn't a fluke or a memory. The music was in her, a living, breathing thing she could summon at will. As she played this second astonishing tune, the camera panned to the wings for a brief moment. It found her parents. Her mother was openly crying now, tears of pride streaming down her face as she laughed through them. Her father had his arm around her, his own eyes glistening, his face a picture of stunned, grateful joy. They were not stage parents seeking fame. They were simply a mom and a dad, watching their daughter fly higher than they ever dreamed possible. And their pure, loving emotion was the final, human chord that made the whole moment completely real. This was not a show. This was a family's miracle, shared with the world. The final note of her impromptu piece faded, and the audience, already on their feet, found another reserve of energy. The applause crashed over the stage again, louder, longer. A wave of pure awe that seemed like it would never end. Emily sat on the bench, a little overwhelmed by the noise now, but with a bright, dazed happiness on her face. She looked out at the blur of standing people and clapping hands, then quickly turned and buried her smile in the fur of her stuffed rabbit. Ellen let the applause ride, standing beside the piano and shaking her head with a grin that spoke of sheer delight. When the noise finally began to subside into an excited hum, she knelt down again. "You," she said to Emily, her voice full of warmth, "are going to come back anytime you want, okay?" That was incredible. She then did what she was famous for. She revealed a giant, wrapped present, something fun and silly for a 6-year-old, and another larger gift for the whole family. But the real gift, the one that filled the air, was the feeling in the room. It was a collective sense of having witnessed something rare and true. The segment ended with Ellen giving Emily a gentle high five, and the little girl, clutching her new presents and her old rabbit, walked back off the stage as the audience cheered her every step. Back in the wings, the world was soft and blurry for Emily's parents. The roar of the crowd muffled as they swept their daughter into a hug, so tight it lifted her feet off the ground. They didn't say "you were great" or "you did it." They just held her, their faces pressed into her hair, saying nothing and everything at once. The stage manager and crew were beaming, giving them thumbs up, but respectfully giving the small family a bubble of privacy in the bustling darkness. The rest of the day was a happy, exhausted blur. There were congratulations from producers, photos taken, and a kind chat with Ellen back in her dressing room, where she was just a nice lady in jeans, not a TV star, who told Emily she had a superpower. Emily, now floating on a sugar-free high of excitement, was mostly interested in the shiny buttons on Ellen's sofa. The normalcy of her curiosity, even here, made her parents laugh with relief. The flight home the next day felt different. The world outside the airplane window hadn't changed, but something inside their small family had shifted. Emily slept most of the way, worn out from the adventure, her rabbit tucked under her chin. Her parents sat in a comfortable silence, holding hands. The fear and worry of the past weeks completely dissolved. It had been perfect, more than perfect. It had been right. They landed, collected their bags, and drove back to their quiet street in Illinois. The familiar sight of their house, with its slightly overgrown lawn and the swing set in the back, was a comfort. They carried a sleeping Emily inside and put her to bed in her own room. With its familiar clouds painted on the ceiling, it was over. The grand adventure was done. They could go back to their normal lives, but the world had other plans. The morning after the show aired on television, the phone began to ring, and it did not stop. First, it was local friends and family, their voices buzzing with excitement. "We saw her, she was amazing." Then, it was the local news, asking for an interview. Then, it was other news stations from bigger cities. Then, emails began pouring into the address the show had listed, hundreds of them. People wrote to say Emily's music had moved them to tears. Teachers wrote saying they played the clip for their students. Parents of other children wrote to share their own stories. The video of her performance was not just on TV, it was exploding on the new, growing world of the internet. People shared it with messages like, "You have to see this to believe it." Life did not return to normal. It became a new kind of normal, one with a gentle buzz always in the background. The mailbox was full of letters. Interview requests came in carefully, filtered by the same family friend who had started it all. He helped them navigate, saying no to far more than they said yes to. Their rule was simple: whatever they did, it had to be good for Emily. It had to be joyful, or it wasn't happening. And through it all, Emily remained, wonderfully, just Emily. She would do a nice interview, or even play a small concert, wearing a pretty dress and charming everyone with her shy smile, and then her thunderous music. But the next day, she would be back in her play clothes, begging to go to the park, or sitting at the old family piano, not to practice, but to figure out what the sound of rain on the roof would look like as notes on a page. The fame was a thing that happened around her, like weather. She lived inside it, protected by her parents' fierce love and her own simple focus. The music was the fun part. The rest was just noise. That focus is what grew. The appearance on Ellen wasn't an ending. It was a key turning in a lock. It opened a door. Because of that day, world-class musicians saw her. Composers reached out. Opportunities for her to learn and grow, not as a novelty, but as a real artist, began to appear. She took piano lessons with renowned teachers who challenged her. She learned to write her music down, to study the great composers, not to copy them, but to have a conversation with them. The little girl who played from pure instinct began to marry that instinct with knowledge. The prodigy was becoming a professional, but one who never lost the joy. She performed with grand orchestras, her small figure seated at a massive concert grand, commanding the attention of thousands. She composed music for films. She released albums of her own original work. Each step was bigger, But the core of it, the little girl sharing the story in her head, remained exactly the same. Years later, people would talk about that first performance on Ellen as the moment she was discovered. But for her family, that wasn't quite right. She wasn't hidden away to be found. She was a bright light in a loving home. The show simply turned that light toward the world, so everyone else could see it, too. That single performance became more than a viral video. It became a source of hope, a proof that pure, uncorrupted talent exists. It inspired countless children to sit down at a piano. It reminded adults of the magic that exists when someone does something not for fame or money, but for love. Back in Illinois, the old family piano still sits in the corner of the living room. The house is quieter now, but the piano is not silent. When Emily comes home for a visit, now a young woman, she still sits there sometimes, not to practice for a concert, but just to play. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you might hear a few bars of a familiar, sparkling melody, one that sounds like colors dancing in a cold sky. It is the sound of a journey that circled the world, but never really left home. It all started with a decision to share a gift, a deep breath in a bright light, and the day a 6-year-old girl left everyone truly and completely astonished.